Hello and welcome to Homemaking with Joy. I'm Rachel. Today we are canning cranberry juice. This is the first year that I've canned cranberry juice, but I've already done one round of it and my family is a big fan. I was at the store the other day and I saw these cranberries on sale very inexpensively, and so I grabbed a couple more bags to make some more juice for my family and show you how I make it. It's perfect for beginners, it's so easy, and it is really delicious. Before any food preparation can occur, I need clean jars. So I often run them through the dishwasher, but sometimes, the dishwasher still gets stuff stuck up in there. So I just have some hot soapy water here. I'm going to wash my jars, and then I will get on to washing my cranberries to fill my jars. There used to be a rule that you needed to sterilize your jars before you can with them. That's no longer the case, so hot soapy water should be just fine, and then you are ready to start your canning. Jars are washed. I'm pretty sure that will be enough. We'll find out later. And now I have to get my cranberries ready. So these are 12-ounce bags of cranberries. I got them for 99 cents a piece, and I got 6 of them. So I'm going to cut these open, put them in my colander, rinse them, clean them really well, and pick out any bad ones, and then I'll be ready to put them back in my jars. All 6 bags of cranberries did fit in my colander. So I'm going to grab my 1/2 cup scoop, and I'm going to put 1.5 cups of cranberries in each jar. Jars are full and ready to go. I got exactly 13 jars worth of cranberries, which is perfect. So again, 6 bags of 12 ounces equals about 13 jars, depending on how many bad ones you have to pick out. I just picked out a couple that were squished or too light or that sort of thing. So I have 13 jars here of the cranberries measured out. So now I'm going to add the sugar. You can add anywhere from 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup of sugar, depending on how tart or sweet that you like your juice. I've heard that you can use honey or maple syrup. I'm just going to use organic cane sugar, and we like to do 1/3 cup. So it's still a little bit tart, but not so tart that my kids won't drink it or like it. So I'm going to grab my cane sugar, 1/3 cup in each jar, and then we'll move on to the last ingredient besides water. Again, so easy, so easy. The last thing to add is some lemon juice, just 1 teaspoon per jar. You're welcome to get a teaspoon and measure it. I'm just gonna dump it because it's fine. So do whatever you want to do. The last thing we add to the jars is water. It's really that easy. So I'm going to fill each jar up to 1 inch half space, and then I will debubble, which I'll show you in the video. And also I like to use filtered water for my drinking, canning, all those things, but it takes time to filter enough water to do all these jars. So I filled up a couple big mason jars of filtered water, and that just makes it easier for filming too. I'll just top all the jars off, debubble them, and then we'll get ready for the rings and the lids. One thing to note as you're filling your jars with water is the temperature of the water. I'm using room temperature water in all of my jars, which means I have to have room temperature water over here in my canners. If these were to be really hot, if I were to have them boiling and hot, and I put room temperature or even cold jars in there, they would most likely crack. Or if you want to put hot water in your jars, you can have this hot, and then they would go together just fine. You just don't want to shock your jars with a temperature change of hot versus cold, whichever direction you want to go, because then you will have broken jars and lost cranberry juice, and it's very, very sad. So again, just make sure they match whatever temperature, both hot, both cold, both room temperature, just make sure they match. I've put water in all of my jars. They're not quite at 1 inch headspace because I haven't debubbled yet. So I'm going to debubble, which just means get any pockets of air out from inside the jar, because we want those out. We want the whole quantity of the jar to be full of liquid or the solid cranberries. So I'm going to use a little tool called a debubbler that came with one of my canning kits. You don't need that. You could use a plastic utensil. Some people like to use a chopstick. It's just recommended that you don't use a metal utensil because you could scratch your jar, which could damage the integrity of it. But I doubt that would happen if all you have is like a metal knife, but I like to use this handy little tool. On this end it has headspace measurements, and on this end it's just rounded. So I'm going to use this, and 1 inch headspace is just like the neck, the rim of the jar here, so you don't really have to measure that. But here we go. I'm going to get all the bubbles out and then adjust the water level at the top. Oftentimes the liquid level changes as you get any bubbles out. So now that one's perfect. I'm not really worried about mixing the sugar in the bottom of the jar because this is going to be boiling for a little while, so I don't think that would make much of a difference. Can you see the difference between these two jars? I've debubbled this one, and then I put the water level all the way up to the neck of the jar here. This one has not been mixed yet because there's still a little extra space at the top. So I'm going to debubble that one and then make sure the water line is all the way up to the top. The contents of my jars are good to go, and so now I'm going to work on the lids. We want to wipe down all of the rims to make sure there's no food or anything stuck there that would hinder a good seal with the lid. So some people just use a paper towel and water. Some people do a paper towel with vinegar, especially if you have something greasy. You need the vinegar to cut through that grease. This is really simple. I'm just going to use a clean cloth from my kitchen to wipe down the rims. Basically, there would be splashed water, maybe some sugar on it. I'm not really concerned. Then I'm going to get the flats and the rings. So there used to be a rule that you needed to warm up the flats before you put them on the jars, but they make the lids differently now. You don't need to do that. Also, I believe the box says you're supposed to wash the flats before you put them on your jars. I do not. So choose what you'd like to do there as well. We're going to put the rings on fingertip tight, and then we transfer them to the water bath canner. And it's easy, just like that. Most often I use ball canning lids just because that's what's convenient to purchase near me. But if you know of a canning lid company that wants to sponsor me, hit your girl up. So just pop these on top, depending on the correct size. And now they're stuck together. Again, feel free to wash these if you'd like to, but I don't. My flats are on, and now we're gonna grab rings. So, fingertip tight. This is a difficult concept for a lot of people, including myself. This is the best way that I've seen to demonstrate it. Put this on and twist it until the jar moves on the counter. Okay, now just give it like a quarter more turn, and it's on. You don't want it too tight because then it'll buckle under pressure. You don't want it too loose because then the contents will leave your jar. So that is about fingertip tight. Let me do it again. Here's your jar. The flat is on. Here's a ring. Twist it. And just a quarter twist more. There you go. Are full, they're ready to go. There should be about 2 inches of water above the jars. That's not always possible because of the size of your pot, but just do your best. There are some canners online who don't do that, and their canned goods turn out just fine. So I'm not too concerned about that part. I'm going to put the lids on, crank the temperature, and then just wait for this to come to a rolling boil. If there's a canner in your life and he or she needs a new water bath canner, I highly recommend this one. This one is a hand-me-down and it works just fine. It's just a pot and it boils water, which is what you need it to do. But this one is really nice because it's stainless steel and it has the glass lid so you can see when it's boiling. This one you have to take the lid off and let some heat escape. This one you can just see it, which is really nice. Also, because this is a nice quality pot, I have used it for things other than canning. It's just a giant pot. So on big canning days with family, if this doesn't need to be used as a canner, it can just be used as a gigantic pot, which is awesome. So I will do my best to find a link to put that down below because I got it as a Christmas present and it has served me very, very well. Once the pots come to a rolling boil, you will set your timer for 25 minutes and just let it boil for the whole 25 minutes. When the timer is finished, turn the heat off, and I like to let it sit for a bit. So you can let it sit with the lid on or off. I usually let it sit for the lid with the lid on for a couple of minutes because if you take it off right away, the boiling water can splash out and I don't want you to get burned. So I let it sit for a couple of minutes, take the lid off for a couple of minutes, and then I will take the jars out and put them on a towel-lined countertop, like 2 towels thick. I don't want the temperature difference to be so much that they crack, but we do need the temperature difference enough so it cools down and vacuums that lid onto your jar. So I'll show you when that time comes, but I have a while until it comes to a rolling boil because I used room temperature water. If you used hot water, it would come to a boil more quickly, obviously, but it's really easy to just let the pot sit. So my kids are done with their quiet time. I'm gonna go be a mom and wait for these to start boiling. We are at a rolling boil in this pot and a rolling boil in this pot. I will start the timer for 25 minutes. My timer just completed, so I'm going to turn the heat off of both of these pots very carefully and then let them sit for a couple minutes. My kids are awake now, so I'm going to leave the lids on for just a few minutes until that stops happening, and then I'll move the lids off and let them cool a couple minutes that way before removing the jars.
Yes, I know the cowboy boy. I know the cowboy boy. Yes, I know the cowboy boy. Boy, boy, boy.
My jars are out and cooling, and that's pretty much the last step I have to share. It's best practice to let your jars sit for about 24 hours before removing the rings to make sure you have a nice good seal. I rarely do 24 hours. I do at least like overnight. I'll leave these here till tomorrow morning completely undisturbed, and tomorrow morning I will check all the lids and rings and all the things. Hi, buddy. If for some reason one of them doesn't seal, I'll just stick it in the fridge and we'll drink it right away. For this cranberry juice to taste as good as it can, I recommend letting it sit on your pantry shelf for at least 2 weeks. It will continue to get stronger in flavor and more delicious through those weeks. But then feel free to crack it open and enjoy. I haven't found my favorite way to use the cranberries that are left in there. At this point, my chickens just eat them. So if you have any good ways to use the cranberries that are left over from our cranberry juice, please leave a comment and let me know, because I'd love to use them in a more productive way. Although chickens and eggs are a good way to do that, but you know what I mean. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye. Good morning. Here's a little bonus content of my jars the next day. I wanted to show you. Listen to that tap. That is what it should sound like when your jar has fully sealed. I check each lid to make sure it is pushed down the whole way. There should be no give, and the sound that tap makes tells me that it is sealed. Then, for good measure, I lift the jar by the lid and it should be able to hold. Granted, you don't want to do this whole lot, but it will hold. Just shake it up. You can see some of the sugar in the bottom, but when you open the jar and mix it up, it should be just fine. Enjoy your cranberry juice, everybody.